name is Tim Nialik. I'm the director of the Upper Pioneer Valley Veteran Services. We cater to helping veterans and their dependents qualify for benefits and file for some of the programs that the feds in the state might have to help them. One of the things we deal a lot with is people that aren't in a good situation, or perhaps a family member has recently passed. So we started having some displays in here to kind of take their mind off of that, or relate to a husband that was in World War II or a relative in World War I, and it's just kind of blossomed from there. People will donate some displays, or veterans will bring in some of their artifacts, and they like to have them displayed rather than hidden in the closet. So that's kind of how it started off. We did this similar to this down in Holyoke, and we're trying to recreate some of that here in Greenfield. This is a shadow box that a family out of Shelburne Falls gave to us. Their father was a lieutenant colonel, and he passed, and he had duplicates, so they wish to donate that and have it displayed. He was in World War II. So you can see he has a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and some of the other medals are from World War II. Another family donated their coffin flag from when their father passed from World War II. A lot of times the families get these flags and they don't know what to do with them, so we either show them where they can buy a display case, or they'll donate them for display. This one here is kind of a sad story. The lady that owns Yankee Storage down here, when her husband cleaned out the units, they found all of these medals in one of the units and couldn't track the owner. And one of these is actually the second highest medal that a veteran can get for valor. So that was kind of disappointing that that history had kind of disappeared. So we wanted to make sure at least his memory was honored up here with displays. A couple other things. This is a World War I uniform that we have displayed. This is my great-grandfather. We have his photo, his discharge from World War I. We have blueprints for battleship from the Great White Fleet prior to World War I. We have historical flags we keep adding. We've got the flag for the Green Mountain Boys. We have the Serapis flag. You'll look around, you'll see some other flags that we have displayed. Some World War II uniforms that were donated by our selectmen up in Leiden, donated that. That was a family member. A lot of the older pictures you'll see were in the American Legion, and when the Legion was closing here, we wanted to make sure that that history wasn't lost. So I took as many of the good photos that they had, and we displayed them over here to kind of honor the American Legion guys. So we have a lot of photos from them, a lot of the past commanders. Sure, and you'll see stuff continually changes in here. Guys come in and they say, hey, I got something like that in the garage, and they'll bring it in and we'll donate it. And a lot of it is tied into the Greenfield area history, whether it was World War II or World War I guys going off the war, or guys out of Montague. This ship over here was a gentleman in Montague brought that over. So that's basically what we're trying to do, is make sure the families can come in and see some of the stuff that was happening during those time periods, and we just don't want it to be lost to history. We try to tie in, you know, the veterans that went through World War I, World War II, on up to now, they faced a lot of the same struggles. So they came home either they weren't employed, or they came home with maybe some PTSD or battle scars that they had, or they had family issues because they were gone away. So we try to show our younger veterans that, you know, you're not going through something unique. It doesn't make you a bad person if you're having some issues or some struggles, and try to help them relate to guys. You know, it's almost like a peer thing. You know, if you can talk to a guy from Korea or Vietnam, he's going to tell the young guys or the young women, yeah, we face the same kind of struggles, different era, but a lot of the same struggles. So we try to tie that in too for the veterans as they come through here. The things that a veteran like myself or any of the veterans on my staff that really goes a long way is, if you know somebody's a veteran, just thank them. Just thank them for their service. A lot of these veterans aren't looking for handouts. They just like a little recognition, and it doesn't have to be a parade. It doesn't have to be, you know, a ceremony. It's just, hey, you know, I understand you were in the service. You know, thanks for your service, and that goes a long way for these guys. Obviously, our programs here that we have to administer these programs through the feds and through the state, there are a lot of programs out there for the help of the veterans, a lot more than was available for veterans from earlier eras, especially our Vietnam era. Some of the stuff we're relearning that the post-Vietnam advocates went through. We're relearning it, but we're building on what they learned. So there's programs now to cover almost every aspect of a veteran's service time, whether it's education, housing, employment, help with overdue bills, help with the colleges. Veterans that are disabled, obviously, there's compensation programs for them. There is a ton of programs for homeless veterans out there. So again, maybe people should just be aware of those programs, where to refer a veteran to. Every town has a VSO like us. Every town in Massachusetts has that. And just be aware of, be selective with their donations. There are a lot of things out there that are scams. So, you know, if there's a question about a donation or somebody calls you, you can give us a call and we can help, because our organization vets some of those donation people so that you make sure it's going to the right thing and the money is getting to the veteran, not going to an organization.
This is the Civil War section of our museum here at the VA office in Greenfield. And I've entitled it the Sergeant George Washington Aldrich Civil War and Grand Army of the Republic Museum. My great-great-grandfather was in the 1st Mass Cavalry and was General Meade's cavalry guard the 3rd day at Gettysburg, and later was wounded at the Battle of Aldie. So I was lucky enough to contact the National Archives, and they sent me copies of his complete service record from the time he went into the service until he died, his pension, his death certificate. And this is, I was lucky enough from a relative to get a picture of, that's Grandpa Georgie and Grandma Martha, and their homestead, the Aldrich homestead, was located in Enfield, Mass, which is now under the Quabbin Reservoir. So I was very lucky to get that. Our director is a master woodcrafter, and he specially built this case for me when I had asked him about, to all the other pieces we have from all the other wars, to do a Civil War one. And I would bring in my whole collection and I would donate it to the museum. This I received from the National Archives, and this is a picture of the Company G of the 1st Mass Cavalry. So I call him Grandpa Georgie, even though he was my great-great-grandfather. He's in there somewhere. When I went to Gettysburg, this is General Meade's headquarters, where he was his cavalry guard, and got him out of there the 3rd day when the Confederates were overshooting. And it contains the original furniture. It's a wonderful spot. That's his grave in West Springfield. This is the 1st Mass Cavalry monument on the battlefield of Gettysburg. My letter from the National Archives. And then this is all from the time he entered until the time he got out. He was wounded at the Battle of Aldie, where he took a Confederate bullet, then transferred to the Invalid Corps, which was a branch of the service where veterans still could serve their country, but they were in too bad a shape to actually fire a gun or go into battle or ride a horse. So he was part of the Invalid Corps after the Battle of Aldie, when he was wounded. And he was stationed at the Washington Arsenal, which he was there for the hanging of Lincoln's conspirators. He was one of the guards at that time, which was pretty important. What I'm always amazed about this is how thorough they were, and also their penmanship is so beautiful. They really wrote beautifully. But I've got all his, everything he did, you know, his discharge, his pension, and then some things about the general that I portrayed, General Gus Pleasanton, who was the Quartermaster General for the Army of the Potomac. And then I also added some, as on to the back, some things about the Grand Army of the Republic, which I'm kind of a member of. I'm a member of the Sons of Union Veterans. And that was an organization that was formed in the 50s after the last Civil War veteran passed away. And a lot of people don't know about the Grand Army of the Republic. It was formed after the war in 1866. And it was a fraternity similar to the Freemasons, but we were responsible for preserving the battlefields, the cemeteries, the monuments, and we passed through Congress the official Memorial Day, which was known before as Decoration Day. So I as General Gus Pleasanton, after the war was over, I've transitioned my character into, and he was the first commander of the General Ulysses S. Grant, Post Number 5 in Philadelphia. So what a lot of the boys did was they would recondition their Civil War uniforms and add, as you can see on my uniform, the collar, the Grand Army of the Republic, and the button signifies that I'm the commander of this post. And as if we sort of continue around, this is an interesting piece that I created, and one of my favorite Confederate generals was Jeb Stuart, and his wife Flora handmade him his headquarters flag. When I first created the Jeb Stuart flag, and I was wondering if I should display it, I know that in the recent months there's been a lot of controversy about the Confederate flag and what it means and that type of thing. For me, personally, I feel that the Confederate battle flags should be in museums where they can be displayed and preserved because they are a historic artifact. When you are paying $25 to go to the Museum of the Confederacy, you are going to, you know what you're going to see. You're going to be escorted by trained Park Service people who are going to explain to you the significance of these flags. I don't feel that people who have them on the back of their trucks or the state houses that still want to have some variation of it, that those need to be taken down. Those were only put up when the Supreme Court ruled on segregation, and they were done as a protest in the old days. And I think that they should be taken down because they are not the battle flags. The battle flags are square. They weren't the oblong ones you see on the back of people's trucks and that kind of thing. So that's my personal feeling. I know that when General Lee and General Grant were being interviewed on C-SPAN the day of the Appomattox surrender, there was a caller who called in, and they just bristled, and they said, each of them said, "I have no comment." So a general usually is supposed to stay completely out of that fray, but I felt that since Jeb's flag is here, I wanted to explain why I felt it was important to represent both sides and my feelings about preserving the actual battle flags, because this would be honoring the dead, not just doing some kind of stupid protest. And the state houses belong to all of the people, and they should have a different flag. So that's my take on it. He had a fire at his headquarters, and he sent the flag back to Florida to repair. Unfortunately, he was killed at the Battle of Yellow Tavern before she could ever do it. The family kept it, and in the 50s, they donated it to the Museum of the Confederacy. And this is as close a representation or a copy as I could make. That's what it looks like in the museum. I did all the stitching by hand, the burning, and everything like that. This is an 1867 Grand Army of the Republic cemetery flag holder. It was formed in 1866, 1867. They started decorating the cemeteries, and by its construction, we can tell that it is an original. And then there's a photo of me that was taken by a very nice Hallmark studio graduate a number of years ago. And next to it is a Civil War artillery officer's short sword. Artillery officers always had a short sword. They didn't have the big, long, huge ones because they were running around too much. They were setting up horses, they were moving the cannons, and even though it doesn't have the sheath that it goes to, it's still a wonderful piece. And when they're like that, I call it patina, and I would never think of cleaning it, but it is the real deal. Under it is as being General Pleasanton. That is a reproduction of what my commission would have looked like, signed by Abraham Lincoln and the Secretary of War, Edward Stanton. And then a very nice lithograph of the generals and how the generals did like what I call it their bling. They loved their braiding, they loved their uniforms. And then the famous picture of President Lincoln and General McClellan at Antietam when he came to visit. It was a completely staged photograph by Brady because you can see to the left bottom they have a captured Confederate flag on the ground. Unfortunately, Lincoln and McClellan hated each other, but for the public they had to do a unified type front and act friendly and everything. But he was very happy when Grant finally stepped up and took over, and McClellan could be not really fired, sort of retired is a more polite way of saying it. The next piece in the collection that's kind of interesting is what is known as the Conductor's hat. And the boys would, this dates from 1888, and it's a Masonic Knights Templar hat. But a lot of many of the Grand Army of the Republic boys were Masons. So they would reuse a lot of their Masonic regalia for their parade regalia. This is also from about the same time period. The medal that I'm wearing, which is the Grand Army of the Republic medal. And I was lucky enough to find the medal and a tintype of the gentleman who owned it. And those were a treasure. Next to this is the uniform that I wear on Memorial Day. You can tell that along with, I usually wear the Lincoln mourning ribbon, and you can tell it's a mourning because of the black braiding. And then this baldric or sash, well, this would be the sash, and this is the baldric. And they would put their medals on the baldric. It makes it a lot easier than trying to line them up on the uniform. And this is for the Irish Brigade. And this also dates from about 1888. And this is the General's full dress frock coat, which I added the Grand Army of the Republic emblems on. And then for Veterans Day, I usually wear the short coat. This would have been the coat that they would have worn into battle or worn when they were on a horse and had to move, because once you're in this thing with a sword and everything, it's purely ceremonial and you really don't do that much moving. And then this piece right here is a wonderful Grand Army of the Republic flag holder that the director found. It's extremely rare and very, very beautiful and very heavy. And there's a nice explanation of it, and a real treasure. I've never seen another one of these, and I don't believe he has either. So that was a wonderful addition. He's been extremely helpful in coming up with things. And then another little piece that he found was this would be another flag holder for that time period for the Grand Army of the Republic. So if you're in a cemetery and you see these little stars with the flags, you know that these were Civil War veterans. And we decorate, we grew up when we decorate all the cemeteries and everything. When I created the museum, I wanted to sort of touch on the Union, the Confederacy, President Lincoln, and our own local Grand Army of the Republic. What I have in here, a wonderful colorized tintype of the president. They have a new process now where they can colorize all the photographs, and I love it because it really brings the people to life and makes them human and makes them not just a tintype. I have these I made. It's a reproduction of the actual powder charge that would have been put into the cannon, the cannonball, and then when I was at Antietam, nowadays, instead of using canvas bags with the powder charge, they use a 25% amount of powder, so it's not such a big boom, and they use foil. So I was at the site watching the thing, and I said to the park ranger, I said, would it be all right if I took some of that foil, because it goes all over the battlefield? And he kind of chuckled. He said, son, it'll save me from having to go and take it. So that's kind of my little souvenir of Antietam and the foil. This I did up, and it's a copy of the casualty report of my great-great-grandpa, and that would have been the bullet that stayed in his leg for the rest of his life. And this is a picture of him at the 1913 reunion at Gettysburg. This is a booklet that my great-great-grandpa brought back from the 1913 Gettysburg reunion. And within it is Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and some other really wonderful things. And the boys were all just given them as souvenirs. And there are very few of these around because they're paper and leather and it dry rots, and I was very lucky to get this piece too. Next, this is a representation of what a mourning ribbon would be used for during the Civil War. The rites of death and mourning were very, very strict and much more regimented than today. And everybody would wear a mourning ribbon on Memorial Day, or if their loved one had been killed in the war. This is a piece of the witness tree that was one of the last trees that were standing after the battle. Representation of it, and it was what is the mulberry tree. It was a mulberry tree, so there was a mulberry tree on the Pry House grounds, and I picked a piece of it up and kind of did the impression that this was a piece from there, which is wonderful for school kids. This is a copy of the surrender terms when General Lee and General Grant met at Appomattox Courthouse. The aides wrote out the agreement, and if you turn it over, they both signed it on the back, and it's a wonderful piece. And the piece itself is located at the Appomattox Courthouse Museum, and I'd love to see it. I'm hoping someday to be able to go down. This is a 1910 postcard of the monument, the Civil War monument that everybody knows from downtown Greenfield. What's interesting about it is the fact that there are only 2 monuments in the country that have eagles atop them. Usually when you see a Civil War monument, it's got a soldier on it. The other one's in Michigan. Another kind of secret is the fact that Freemasonry, some of the ritual and some of the folklore on it is based on King Solomon's Temple. And King Solomon's Temple had 2 pillars on either side. And this is a Masonic pillar. So any Mason going by in the old days would have known that Masons had built this monument. And then this is a picture of the original GAR building that was located where the courthouse is today, with the Dahlgren Navy cannon, which is now on the town common. And they closed in 1926, and it became the Girls Club, and then later on was torn down to make the courthouse. The next piece pertaining to GAR is a memorial address that was done for the Edwin E. Day Post GAR on May 31st, 1915. And it was by a Franklin G. Fessender. And what's really funny about it is it's 17 pages long, so that man loved to talk. And this was the Memorial Day address booklet that they would have given out as souvenirs to everybody who had attended. The next GAR piece is a wonderful tintype of a Greenfield GAR parade, Veterans Day in 1905. And it's a very cool shot. And I call them my old duffers, all the old GAR fellas, my old duffers. So that's a wonderful piece. And you never know when you go out, you never know what you're going to find or when you're going to find it or that type of thing. The next piece that keeping sort of in with the Lincoln section is the last official tintype that the president had taken a couple of weeks before he died. And it was colorized, which I just love. I think it's just beautiful. Another piece in the collection is a reproduction of the revolver that Booth used in the assassination. course, the real one is in the Smithsonian, and it's just a odd but very interesting piece of history, and I was very, very lucky to find it. And then this is a period 150-year-old mourning ribbon, and I have a friend of mine who does tintypes at Antietam, and he produced what were called thumbnail tintypes. He only produced 75 of them, and he gave me a couple for Christmas, and I put that in the middle of it. They would have saved flowers and dried them, and so that would be a representation of perhaps a lady was at the funeral and laid some flowers and then wanted to keep them. In the Museum of the Confederacy is the last orders that General Lee sent to his men, and about, you know, thanking them for their service and that type of thing. And it is on display at the Museum of the Confederacy, along with a little very tiny oil painting of General Lee that Mrs. Lee wore all her life. And within the locket was a piece of the general's hair. So I took to do the I don't know what you would call it, the representation. That's my hair, but the Victorians were very fond of, if somebody dies, you always keep their hair for some reason. I don't know why, but it makes for a very, very nice piece and a nice story. And if you do go to the Museum of the Confederacy, you see them all together in the museum. Just before the Battle of Antietam, General Lee sent orders, which the copy is right here, to General Hill, and then they were going to go on to General Jackson. Well, his courier took the orders, wrapped them in cigars, put them in his boot, and when he was riding to go to General Hill, they dropped out of his boot. Well, General McClellan's men found the orders, and they're called Lee's Special Order 199, the so-called Lost Order. And so before the battle, Hill hadn't heard anything, Jackson hadn't heard anything. Lee thought his message had gotten to them, so they basically had to wing the Battle of Antietam. That's why McClellan supposedly won the war. If they had gotten these orders, I think that battle would have turned out really differently than it did. Now at Appomattox Courthouse, when the Confederates surrendered, they had to sign an oath of allegiance to the United States, stating that they would not take up arms again, the war was over, and they had to keep this on their person, because with this they were able to use any Union transport, trains, whatever they could find to get home, and also they could stop at a Union camp and they could be fed or given clothes or provided for. And also, if they bumped into any Confederates that hadn't surrendered, without this piece of paper they could have been arrested for treason and for desertion and could have been shot. So this was their proof to fellow Confederates, the war's over, I'm done, I'm going home. And I always wear this in when I do an event or something, I'll always have this in my pocket. And if I'm dressed as a Confederate, because I do Union and Confederate, so that the Union general in charge can't arrest me. And then this is kind of a funny little piece. This is a tintype of me as a Confederate bummer. Now, what a bummer was a fellow who would go out and try to scavenge for food for the Army. And the story of this was, I was a bummer. I had stolen General McClellan's chicken, and they shot me. So I thought it would be a very interesting piece to have. So in the barn of Pry House Museum, they had an old Civil War type coffin, and they put me on the front porch and took my picture. So it's one of my favorite little funny pieces. Somebody, can't really remember who it was, but he said about if you don't remember history, then the mistakes you made before will be repeated. And I think the Civil War was a very, very important period in our country's life. And people complain now about Congress and they complain about the problems with politics. they have no idea what it would have been like to live through the Civil War. And also, we're very lucky that the director of this office is also very interested in the history, very interested in the uniforms, as you'll see in the next section. And we share a love of preserving these things, especially for the kids, because today a lot of people don't even really know that much about Vietnam. And by having this office in Greenfield, I personally have seen them help so many veterans that need either financial or any other kind of aid, and it's a wonderful crew that works here. And it's just a real good thing to have it here in Greenfield. And I just think it's very important to honor these people because they were ready to lay their lives down. Many of them did lay their lives down. And I know personally, I mean, I enjoy the Civil War, I enjoy portraying a Civil War general, but I think I would be terrified in those times to go into war. And the people that are doing it today are fighting a whole different type of war. And many of them are coming back with many problems, both psychologically and financially and everything. And I think we have to take care of our boys, because they did the same thing. They never knew from one day to the next if they were going to be able to come home or not. So there's an old Civil War thing: duty, honor, and respect. And anything I can do for them or anything I can do for this office, I'm always happy to do anything I can.